All right, everybody, this is Dr. Hathcock again, and I'm doing a review here to get you ready for exam number 3. Let's see, you're going to need to know your presidents this go around. We've got just a little bit of James Madison, really with regards to, I don't know, passage of the Second Bank of the United States, his opposition to internal improvements. But then we get into a lot of James Monroe, era of good feelings, get along, go along kind of president. Monroe Doctrine bears his name, things like that. Then we get John Quincy Adams, that one term, the so-called corrupt bargain. I remember he came in second place, but he gets the presidency because no one got 51% of the electoral vote. Jackson just decimated that guy's presidency. So then we get into Andrew Jackson. That's a big part of our test is Jackson. Go back and look at Jackson's presidency. You know, we talked about his spoils system. You need to look at that. Indian removal is something you need to look at. The tariff fight needs to be looked at, as well as his war with the Second Bank of the United States. So this test is really heavy on Jackson. It really is. Let's see. After Jackson, we get Martin Van Buren. Poor guy has to preside over the Depression, the Panic of 1837. And that reminds me, it's not enough to know that these things are called the Panic. You need to know what year, right? We had a panic in 1819, and then we had one in 1837. Sorry, guys. It's not enough just to tell me that it was a depression. I need to know, is it the Panic of 1819 or is it the Panic of 1837? So that's really it for Van Buren's presidency. Then we get William Henry Harrison, probably the easiest president you'll ever study. Caught pneumonia and died a month later. There you go. Harrison's done. Then Vice President Tyler becomes president. He's really a Democrat in his heart, and he opposes things like a national bank and internal improvements. So the Whig fiasco happens because of Tyler. But also, Tyler is the president for the Webster-Ashburton Treaty. He's the guy who fought hard to get Texas into the Union as well. And then last of our presidents for this test is James K. Polk, Mr. Manifest Destiny. He says we should get Texas, Oregon, and California. And boy, heck about that is thing about that. That's a successful presidency, right? I mean, if that's what you set out to do, he accomplished all those goals. So there you go. All right, so know those presidents. Let's see. You need to know your treaties. This go around, we've got a transcontinental treaty. We've got a Webster-Ashburton treaty, and we've got a Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. So yeah, just like the tests you've taken before, you need to know your treaties. They make for very nice questions on tests. Let's see. I'm trying to think of anything else. Henry Clay was never president, but I'd understand Henry Clay. John C. Calhoun was never president. I'd know my Calhoun, his theories, his ideas. So yeah, as always, you got to study those notes, right? Listen to those lectures and study those notes. All right, well, looking at possible essay topic number 1, looking at economic nationalism and the role of the New Republicans with Henry Clay. So you've got this market revolution that's taken off. It's made possible by a transportation revolution, and you should know those things, what those revolutions were about. But you've got this expanding economy, you've got this growing country, and the New Republicans were guys who wanted to help the country grow. They believe in a big, strong government that can sort of manipulate the economy in a positive direction. And these New Republicans and Henry Clay, you'll remember I explained that they say, thank you, Jefferson, for the adult white male democracy, for life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Thank you for those concepts. But we think Hamilton is correct. We need a big government. We need a national bank. We need a protective tariff. We need these things to help the country grow. So the New Republicans were kind of Jeffersonian, but a lot Federalist. They couldn't call themselves Federalists, though, because, you know, at that point, after the War of 1812, to call yourself a Federalist is to say I'm a traitor to the country. They like winning elections, right? So they call themselves New Republicans because they kind of respect what Jefferson did, but they're also a bit Hamilton as well. And like I explained to you guys, it's kind of like Henry Clay was the guy who took a dash of Jefferson and a dash of Hamilton. Voila, you have the United States. All right, looking at Clay's American system, that was Clay's idea that all of the country would benefit if we had a high protective tariff, a national bank, and internal improvements all working at the same time. So go back and look at the protective tariff of 1816, the second bank of the United States, and the fight for internal improvements that Calhoun tried. I got the bonus bill. It didn't pass, but he did try. Okay, the Missouri Controversy and Compromise. So when I started talking about the Missouri Compromise, I told you guys it was one of the biggest things we would talk about this semester. I told you to put all kinds of stars and smiley faces and rainbow by it. I said that was just as big as the compact theory of the Constitution, which that'll be on this exam as well. But to stick with the Missouri Controversy, and again, this is a review, not a real lecture. You got to go back and listen to this stuff. But in 1819, Missouri wants to become a state. The people of Missouri draft the paperwork. They got enough people, they draft their state constitution, and they're going to call for Missouri to be a slave state. People up north don't want that to happen. It really is a political fight more than anything else. It's about the makeup of Congress. If Missouri's let in, we will have more slave states than free. At that moment, we have 11 free, 11 slave. But if Missouri is brought in as a slave state, then for the first time in American history, we'll have 12 slave states. That would be particularly bad, where in the United States Senate you would have 24 pro-slavery senators to 22 free soil senators. So the North's objection to Missouri statehood really was about politics more than anything else. All right, we'll end that dust up and fight. The South is arguing that's not right. Missouri followed the rules. You can't change the rules. She should be allowed in. Well, then Mr. Talmadge of New York proposes the Talmadge Amendment. And it basically says any child born to slavery from that point forward in Missouri, any child born to slavery in Missouri, that child would be born free. Any slave 25 or older in Missouri, 25 years or older in Missouri is free. And you cannot import slaves into Missouri. Hold on. Sorry, it's always live action here at the Hathcock House. And we're in quarantine and stuff, so there you go. All right. So let's see. Yeah. So Talmadge Amendment, one more time, was any child born into slavery is born free in Missouri. Any slave 25 or older in Missouri is free, and you cannot bring slaves into the state. No importation of slaves. If that were to pass, then that would essentially kill slavery in the state of Missouri 25 years later. So the North says it's an amazing idea. We should have thought it before. You can bring a state into the Union as a slave state, but through gradual emancipation, 25 years later, it's free. Well, the South is fighting mad about that. The heck you say, they're not going to let it pass. So the South threatens to secede. That's spelled S-E-C-E-D-E. The South threatens to secede if the Talmadge Amendment should pass. So North and South are in a dust-up, a big old fight over the institution of slavery out of Missouri. As North and South are yelling at each other, a man from the West, Clay of Kentucky, comes up with a compromise solution. And Clay's Missouri Compromise has 4 parts to it. Number 1 was there would be no Talmadge Amendment. Number 2, Maine would be brought in as a free state. Number 3, Missouri would come in as a slave state. So we maintain our balance there, right? We're 12-12, 12 slave, 12 free. Missouri brought in as a slave state. And the 3630 line on the map, territories north of 3630, no slavery allowed. Territories south of 3630, slavery will be allowed. All right, so with that, the Union is saved. There will not be a war, at least not in 1820 anyways. And yeah, Clay begins his reputation as the great compromiser with a move like that. All right, point 3, the tariff controversy with South Carolina and Calhoun's theory of nullification. All right, so if you go back and look at Jackson's presidency, we talked about the spoils system. Again, you need to know that. We talked about Indian removal. You need to know that. And then the third thing we talked about was the tariff fight. That was a long and winding road of an explanation. So, yes, understand that with the tariff of 1828, the South got upset. Calhoun was made to go home and make his state shut up all that belly aching about seceding and stuff. And Calhoun wrote the South Carolina Exposition and Protest of 1828. He used the compact theory of the Constitution as his basis for a new argument that he called the theory of nullification. It was that idea that the government could, or I'm sorry, the state governments could nullify federal laws if they didn't want them within their borders. Go back and look at how he said that would play out. That if a state nullified a federal law, Congress could either repeal the law or make it an amendment to the Constitution. If it's made into an amendment, then the state can either accept the will of Congress or secede from the United States. In 1828, South Carolina did shut up. Calhoun does go on to be the vice president. But then that Peggy Eaton mess happens. Go back and look at the Peggy Eaton fight. By 1832, Calhoun is out as far as being an ally of Jackson's. With passage of the Tariff of 1832, Calhoun resigns as the vice president, goes home to South Carolina. Then South Carolina goes through with nullification of the tariff. Calhoun has to go back to Washington, D.C. to try to resolve the issue. And he works with Henry Clay to get passed a force bill and then a compromise tariff of 1833. I am very sorry that I'm being short in my explanation of those things. This is a review. This is not a lecture. Go back and look at that. Listen to that part of the lecture where I explain how it all played out, culminating with the compromise tariff of 1833. Clay not only is the architect of the Missouri Compromise, he's also the architect of the compromise tariff of 1833. All right, then we talked a lot about Jackson's war with the Second Bank of the United States. Looking here at point number 4, I'm asking you to understand that war and to list its short, medium, and long-range consequences. So go back and look at Nicholas Biddle. He was trying to save the future of the bank. He understood whoever won the 1832 election would decide whether or not the bank would be rechartered in 1836. He was hoping that that would not be Andrew Jackson. So he works with Clay for an early recharter of the bank. Jackson vetoes that recharter, and Clay will use that as the issue of the campaign. Clay got out there and yelled bank, 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 and the voters said, we don't care, care, care. And Jackson is reelected. He wins the campaign of 1832. And once he's in office, he decides, or once he has a second term, Jackson decides that he wants to destroy the Bank of the United States. That means he has to remove the deposits from the bank. And, he fired a couple of secretaries of the Treasury before he finally got to old Roger Taney. Taney agrees he will take the government's money out of the Bank of the United States, but put it into private institutions that are called pet banks. And because of Jackson's Bank War, the economy began to take some hard turns. The short-range consequence of Jackson's Bank War was the Biddle Panic, that recession that was brought on. The medium-range consequence of Jackson's Bank War is the Panic of 1837, the Depression that racked the country, that poor old Van Buren had to deal with. And then the long-range consequence of Jackson's Bank War is laissez-faire. It's like that last word in the Jackson topic. It's very French. It means hands off or let something do what it's going to do. And basically under laissez-faire, the government would not regulate banks for like another 80 plus years. All right, so that's Jackson's War and its short, medium, and long-range consequences. Again, look, review is about just pointing you in the right direction, guys. I'm just taking it for granted that you've listened to the lectures, that you've taken notes and you've studied those notes. And this is just helping you prepare for your possible essay. And I'm basically saying you need to look at these things. All right, point number 5, the problems with Texas annexation and its consequences. All right, well, the problem for annexing Texas is, number 1, it's expanding slavery out to the west. A lot of northern politicians didn't want Texas in the Union for that reason. So problem number 1 is slavery. Problem number 2 is an unclear border. You could annex Texas, but you don't know if it goes to the Nueces or the Rio Grande. And problem number 3 is it could trigger a war with Mexico. Mexico's not happy about all this, and they would be very upset with the United States if it were to do that. As far as the consequences of the annexation of Texas, there will be a war with Mexico. The border dispute, the ill will between the two countries, is part of why the Mexican-American War will take place. So yeah, that is the massive consequence of Texas annexation, is it in part triggers the war with Mexico. Now, looking at the war with Mexico and its consequences, I guess just kind of remember Zach Taylor's role in things, the big win at Buena Vista, where he's a hero, Jeff Davis is a hero. Winfield Scott commands the army that lands at Veracruz and goes on to capture Mexico City. Definitely you need to know the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, point by point what it called for. And as far as the consequences, so the United States acquires the Southwest, but the question going forward is, as America heads west, are we going to allow the institution of slavery to head west as well? All right, as always, if you guys have any questions, feel free to email me, james.hathcock@my.tccd.edu. We're 3/4 of the way through the semester with this after you guys have taken exam number 3. Just a little bit more effort. We're almost there. Just a quarter of the way left before the end of the semester.